Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We are very excited to have you here to discuss what we're seeing in the cybersecurity and fraud space. Today's session is about the trends and tactics fueling cyber attacks and fraud, and how automation is a common denominator for these large-scale operations and targeted tactics and techniques. We have a very special guest here today, Dr. Jace Cunningham. He is the Chief Strategy Officer at Ericom, and he's also known as Dr. Zero Trust. He is a retired Navy Chief Cryptologist with more than 20 years of experience in cyber forensics and analytic operations. He has expertise in cyber forensics, analytics, offensive and defensive cyber operations, and he's functioned in highly technical and operationally demanding work centers within the NSA, CIA, FBI, and other governmental agencies. We also have our founder here at KASADA, Sam Crowther, with us as well. Sam's passion for security began as a high school student where he worked at Australia's Signals Intelligence Agency. From there, he joined a red team at Macquarie Group, an experience that inspired him to start his own company. With funding from leading US and Australian investors, Sam launched KASADA in 2015 to provide innovative application security solutions to enterprises around the world. So today we have an engaging session planned. It's going to be very conversational, and we encourage you to ask any questions you have in the chat box. So with that, I'll hand it over to Chase and Sam to kick things off.
Yep, that's me. I think I actually have lost some weight since that picture, so I'm glad to see that one. It's always good to lose a little bit of the old COVID weight. There's me, there's you.
I can't grow a beard, so even if I wanted to pretend I have anything, I don't get inbuilt.
Well, I think your origin story is more interesting than mine, honestly. Coming out of the high school stuff and moving on into building your own company is pretty cool. So let's jump into this, and I wanted to talk about this specifically. So let's define what we mean by fraud here, because fraud is a great big term, but when we're talking about $8.8 billion of fraud, how does KASADA see that? And how do you sort of get people to understand the size of this market we're looking at?
Well, considering here we're just specifically looking at digital fraud in the US. First of all, an astounding number, and obviously, as we joked about, a very great growth curve that I'm sure lots of VCs would jump into. But it's insane when you think about the fact that this is close to doubling every single year for the last 4 or 5 odd years, which inevitably means that every single person in the US at some point will be touched by this, right? And if you look at it today, what's 8.8 divided by 300 million? Maybe only a few $100s each. If that starts to grow too much more, all of a sudden it's going to have a material impact in almost every single person's life, right? Especially as we just do so much more online than we really ever have. It is going to get to a very problematic point where you actually just can't avoid it, unless obviously we manage to do more about it.
Yeah, in the VC world, right? This is the slide that you want to show to people of look, see my growth. I'm doubling year over year. They always talk about the rule of 40. We're doing better than the rule of 40. We're 50% plus. So if it's 8.8 here, 2023, probably looking like 11 billion, something like that. If we just kind of follow the clearly indicated trend, growing by 30% from 2020 and onward, is this growing because we're more digital, or is it growing just because the fraudsters are getting better?
Look, I think it's a combination, right? I've no doubt that just as companies are almost forced to improve user experience online, right, to compete, that creates situations where, if security, maybe to protect accounts or whatever it is, that was causing user friction, maybe the business just says, you know what, we eat this. We accept the risk because, we're not prepared to not give customers the best experiences possible. I definitely think that's having an impact. And we have seen this with companies not even wanting to offer 2FA on accounts because they're so nervous it'll impact their user conversion rates and ultimately their revenue. But on the flip side, it's so easy to get into it. You can just like literally hit up Google or YouTube, I don't know, credential stuffing tutorial. There's like free software that's quite sophisticated, or you can like pay someone $5-10 to make you a like custom bit of software to do it. And so, we've gone from a situation where maybe like the barrier to entry was just much higher because it actually required a lot of skill to get into, to now you don't really need to know what you're doing in order to actually do damage. And the fact that someone who is unsophisticated can go and pay someone maybe who specializes in like designing bots for ATO in retail, right? $20, $30, means that all of a sudden, those skills are like crazy democratized, but there's money in it. So, it's attractive.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a hell of a retirement plan, honestly. I mean, if you're looking to throw your 401k money into something, fraud might be a a good place to invest in. So I think with that, because you made a really good point, right, about this is democratized, and we've honestly down leveled everyone's sort of technical requirements to get into this space. The issue that we're facing really is that it's pretty much become a level playing field, right? You used to think that the defenders had kind of the high ground and the bad guys were constantly climbing up the hill to try and attack the choke point, but that's really not what's going on. It's just, if you think that you can make money in this and you see an avenue to do it, you can.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that as well, it's so easy to do it in a way where someone may feel anonymous and like they're never going to be caught, just almost creates a bit of a snowball effect. And we definitely see that in some of the like different forums and groups that we monitor, where they know they're doing something illegal, but they sort of go, well, odds I get caught are really low. I'm going to make some good cash now. Why not? And you think about it from the defender's perspective, though. I mean, it's almost impossible, like, to keep up now with the number of like different adversaries that you need to deal with, purely because it's easy for them to get started, right? That's a very quickly an overwhelming force, right? Because maybe 5 or 10 years ago it was, let's focus on the APTs, right? The guys, the like 1 or 2 groups who we know are just going to spend a lot of effort. That's where we should put our effort. Whereas nowadays, if someone can pick up a tool that was built by someone of that skill level, for $30, now you've got like 20, 30, 40 people that you need to worry and care about, right? And that's expensive.
Yeah. Well, and this shift in the balance of power actually makes it where the argument that I get from a lot of people is, well, I'm a small business, this is not applicable to me, like I don't deal with an APT or whatever else. Like this is actually where the impact becomes felt by small and mid-sized organizations as well as your major enterprises, because everyone, I think we have a slide in here that sort of shows this, like everyone has probably got those compromised credentials that would allow bots and automation to really attack them. Yeah,
exactly. That's it. Unfortunately, because we share customers, and customers, users, people like us, unfortunately can't be trusted to do simple things, which we should be doing, like changing passwords. And I know I'm guilty of not doing that sometimes. It really is a situation where like the customer is actually kind of the weakest link. They get breached on small little e-com retail website, and yet all of a sudden use those creds on, some major retailers, hotel brands, airlines. It's all of a sudden the problem of all of them to deal with. And again, it may just be someone who really doesn't know what they're doing, but was prepared to pay a few dollars to get some configurations, get some proxies, and just sort of goes to town.
And in your experience, especially dealing in those forums and really seeing what's going on with those adversary sort of groups, do you find that if a defender or an average user does kind of the one extra thing to keep them more secure, does that really make a massive difference to their own security posture? Because I mean, statistically speaking, it sure seems to make a difference. If you can use crappy passwords, but enable MFA on top of it, like just do one more thing. And yes, I apologize that we may ask you for 3 seconds of your day to click a approve link, but so what?
Yeah, it does. The problem is when, at least in our experience, the problem is when just they're not even prepared to do that extra one thing, and so they're just as easy of a target as everyone else, right? Whereas, the moment they step up, they don't outrun the bear. They just, outrun the next company that's a little bit easier. And it still holds true, right? These guys are here to make money. They're lazy. Odds that they go and build a totally separate tool just for like one specific company, unless it's a really juicy target, like it's not going to happen. There's too much easy money elsewhere. They're going to follow it.
Yeah, I mean, they're fishing with dynamite, right? Rather than fishing with, one hook lure type thing. So why bother? So the landscape, this is interesting, especially because you guys are deeply entrenched in this, and you see it, the collaborative community, fraud as a service, the supply chain side of it. Explain a bit about what we're looking at here as far as the community of the fraudsters.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think one of the most valuable bits of information that we can acquire as defenders is like, what on earth are our adversaries doing? What are they talking about? Where are they? What are they thinking? What moves are they going to make? And so that's why we put a lot of effort into like, let's understand that. It sounds simple, but the value this enables us to bring is huge. And so look, on the community front, what's kind of fascinating is how open they are to help each other, right? Even where sometimes you maybe perceive it as competition, they're very happy to go, oh, well, here's how I'm bypassing this technology. These are the sorts of companies I'm trying to target. This is what's worked in the past, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a real like almost barter system or goodwill system in some cases that they've built, which is, again, kind of problematic because on the defense side, more often than not, companies don't want to talk about the fact that they have certain problems. They don't want to admit anything was ever wrong. And so, they're just sort of left to maybe deal with it amongst themselves and the small groups of like vendors that they work with versus as a broader community. But what's kind of fascinating about this is those are like, it spawned a bunch of SaaS. I hate using that word, but like literally SaaS tools for fraud. Bunch of people realized, hold on, there's so many like common questions, there's so many common problems that newbies to this space are running into. I'm just going to build a product to solve that. And so I guess enter the era of like Open Bullet, Silver Bullet, the premium version, which is like a credential stuffing tool built on top of headless Chrome. Bring in like the capture solvers, which were using human farms. Now they're using like, computer vision to solve captures. And they're just all offered on like a subscription pay-as-you-go model. It proxies as well, like the residential proxy networks. You go and pay one of the providers, a few bucks per gigabyte of data transferred, and you've got access to millions of legitimate consumer, entry points to the internet, at the drop of a hat. And that sort of in turn fuels the money that is there to be made. And so like the amount of job postings we see, not just in like, the sneaker communities, but like the fraud communities as well, where they're advertised like real businesses and they're run like real businesses. They'll have benefits, they'll have paid time off. Like it's a criminal enterprise. Like that's exactly what it is. And it pays really well. So that sort of, brings in more skills that maybe would have gone to the defense side because it's easier. And, maybe you get the extra $50,000 a year, which makes a real difference in, most people's lives. It's a pretty scary scenario.
Depending on where you live. Well, and I mean, depending on where you live, this might be the best fraud in this sort of scale, might be the best job you can get. I mean, I know we see a lot of people that come from areas where they don't honestly have a lot of financial opportunities. And if you say, well, hey, you can make 50 grand a year stealing people's logins, or you can, I don't know, dig rocks out of the desert, who's going to do what?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one as well, because it sort of comes back to knowing the adversary, right? And understanding like why they're doing it and how hard they will push to achieve it, right? And so I guess if this is someone's bread and butter, right? Like I cannot put food on the table for my family unless this is what I do. It probably changes the game a little bit, right? And so, if you're an organization that maybe has something that's a bit unique that they're not going to be able to get from other places, right? Maybe you're not selling a commodity; it is something a bit more valuable. That's the reality. You need to understand that, right? And so, if someone is going to be more determined, it's going to change the way that you fight them or that you deal with them.
Yeah. Well, and the other point here too that I think is worth taking away is the fact that fraudsters are using automation and machine learning as part of their. I don't say AI because every time you say AI, somewhere a puppy dies, but machine learning is really what we're talking about because it's not that only the good guys have the ability to develop tools that do these types of things. We do not have a franchise on machine learning or automation. The bad guys can do it just as well as the good guys.
Yeah, some of them are brilliant as well. From like the work we've done is there's some very very switched on data scientists on the other side. Yeah, it's impressive, right?
Yeah.
Kudos to their brain.
Yeah, I was reading a report recently that was talking about the cartels in Mexico were starting to recruit folks out of the universities in Mexico City that had computer science and data science degrees and put them into these sort of similar types of nefarious operations. And it's the same model that the Russians really took off with the criminal organizations back then is come out of school, I'll give you an apartment, I'll make sure you got a nice car, and you write some software for me, and then we'll see how that goes. And it's a viable business model.
Very viable, right? As long as there's margin.
It's a lot easier than smuggling cocaine. I mean, really, if you think about it, it's if I was a cartel member, I'd be like, well, I can try and shove drugs over the border, or I can just use some kid out of school that can write code.
Yeah, way easier.
Yeah. So this is from Digital Shadows, 24 billion usernames and passwords. Now, for those that are on this call, I'm not sure if you're aware of it. There's not 24 billion people on the planet. So this is a massive problem. How does this play with the fraud space?
Yeah, this just means, unfortunately, it's inevitable that all of us have had at least, statistically, maybe 4 pairs of creds stolen. And that means there's just so much opportunity for the almost like the gateway to most fraud, right? Which is account takeover. That's you get into the account and you can go and do whatever else you want. And the problem with these, obviously, just like continuing to spill over and over again. As I guess we're told to change our passwords like 2015, right after a major breach. Then every 6 months there's a new event to change them, right? It just almost like reinforces the behavior of stuff it. I don't care, it's out there, which sort of makes the cycle far worse. But this also means that there are very, very simple and free ways to get your hands on lots and lots of valid credentials. You can go and buy. I remember there was a dump a year ago or so, and it was like 700 million credentials, and it was like $50. Like that's, let's assume, I think they go off a 3% success rate, and let's say they're making $1.50 an account. That's a lot of money. If you've got the right tools to go and test them.
The other side of it too is that it's not just necessarily human accounts, right, that they're dealing with. Like if you're thinking about passwords and creds, a lot of these default things, a lot of machines that are smart, which are actually pretty stupid, are misconfigured and do have password spillage that goes on. Like I use Shodan all the time to look around, and you search and do a Google dork for default creds. It's a pretty big space.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, right? It just unfortunately lowers the barrier even more than it already was lowered.
Yeah. Fresh stuff. This is hot off the presses here, especially the LastPass thing. LastPass employee computer was hacked and corporate vault taken. I was reading this report this morning. Not good for these organizations. I mean, for me, it's a bit confounding because I like using a password manager because I'm lazy and I don't like to remember my passwords and I need something that will do it for me. But it also deeply concerns me that we've seen, I don't have LastPass, but I've got other stuff, but that we've seen this happen more than once. And then what do? Do you tell people don't use a password manager? Remember all 300 something of your passwords?
Yeah, that's it, right? It just, unfortunately, we can't do it. We're humans. We're not perfect. And again, history will repeat itself in this case. Let's watch over the next 3 months as almost every company on earth faces more credential stuff in an ATO than they've seen in the last 9 months, right? It's just a horrible, unfortunate cycle, which, unless these things stop, is just not going to cease anytime soon.
Well, and I don't know if people remember, but when LifeLock first came out, the CEO of LifeLock had this marketing campaign where he put his social security number on a truck, drove it around New York City, and his place was, well, no one will ever be able to get to my stuff because of the super awesomeness of LifeLock. It took like hours for it to go sideways. You know, but again, it's one of those things of you tell people not to use these solutions, but I mean, you have to be aware of it, and it does, in my opinion, it makes it where it's you know, it doesn't invalidate the need for these types of solutions, but it does make you where you should be aware. And my machine just I decided not to keep working. I don't know, maybe my ugly factor kicked up a bit, but anyway. So emerging fraud stuff. I was not aware of the streaming fraud, especially if you guys are experts in this. Can you kind of run through what these things are and how they're playing out?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, obviously we're doing more online. There's more opportunity to make money online. And it's kind of interesting to watch how people come about new ways to profit, right? To arbitrage in some way and then to scale it thanks to bots. The streaming fraud is really interesting. And it's just not necessarily like a Netflix streaming. This may be more where you are a content creator. Let's pick on like TikTok or Instagram, like Instagram Live, YouTube, whatever it may be. And like you're streaming content, and there's an ad played when someone logs into your live stream, which you ultimately get paid for. And so what people have started doing, which again it makes complete sense, is a little ecosystem has emerged of people who create fake accounts en masse. Right? They use bots to create millions of fake accounts. They then sell the fake accounts to someone who is a streamer and then is looking to make some more money. So what happens? All of a sudden, they start getting higher view counts, more ads start getting played, they start making money, and then they sort of cash out and cheat the system. Again, it makes a lot of sense, but it becomes really problematic when it is scaled thanks to the fact that people can just access these like automated tools really, really quickly and easily. The retail fraud space is kind of interesting. Refunding is kind of fascinating, where you're sort of exploiting like a business logic loophole where you buy enormous amounts of product, request refunds at just the right time, and you'll get your money back and also get the product. But what's also fascinating in the retail space is what we've come across, almost like pharmacy account fraud, where people have realized, okay, getting into account is good, but what's better is if that account has prescriptions for like controlled substances attached to it, because that's far more valuable than just usernames and passwords. And so from like March last year and ongoing, we've seen this huge rise in cred stuffing to take over accounts on these like online pharmacy sites, some startups, some like big, brands, and then sell them based on whatever prescriptions they have attached for like $15, $20 a pop. So it's very real money. We saw one listing, which was something like 15,000 accounts listed at $20 each. I mean, do the math on that. Like that's some very serious cash for someone who probably spent 3 hours just letting it test credentials through a big proxy network. And that sort of starts to bridge the gap between like very, very illegal and traceable versus like the purely online world, but it's a reality, right? And same with some of the more modern fintechs, like the buy now, pay laters. Similarly, if you can generate, hundreds of thousands or millions of accounts, they get access to a line of credit. There you go, free money. And we've seen people doing this, right? Where they are hell bent on getting as many of these, accounts, assuming that maybe 99% get caught. That's fine. They still get access to $400 of credit per account that doesn't. And so it's a game that makes sense for them to play.
It's just a numbers thing. I had an instance before Amazon started putting multi-factor on their stuff. Somebody got into one of my accounts because guess what? Cyber people get compromised too, right? I was using a not great password, but whatever. Somebody got in and they ordered a printer. And I guess their idea was to order the printer and then pick it up and go resell it or whatever else, like because they drop stuff off in front of your house. Now, luckily, because I'm a tinfoil hat person, I was paying attention to what was going on, and I saw this printer, And I'm like, I didn't order this. And I figured out pretty quickly what was going on. So fixed that, locked it down, whatever else. However, I treated it as a potential, Johnny law enforcement thing where I sat outside of my house for like a day in the bushes waiting for somebody to come pick up this printer, hoping I could, citizens arrest whoever it was. It never happened, but it was kind of weird. It was kind of scary too, because somebody did take over one of my accounts for a little bit. They ordered something with my card, and then they shipped it to my house. So it happens. Now, luckily, Amazon has MFA now, but
that's it, right? And it's kind of violating, like, that's yours. And it's lucky you even noticed that. I definitely have had cases where I didn't see something until like months later, where there was like a big charge on a card, and I just don't look at my bills that closely, and nothing I can do about it.
Oh, I'm super paranoid. Like every transaction of mine that's more than and I'm not joking, than $3.50, I get an alert for. So, anatomy.
I've just accepted what I'm.
I mean, it's kind of a given. There's going to be some fraud that's going to hit. Like we were talking about earlier, it's going to hit somebody somewhere with so many of these things out there. But just being able to have a knowledge of what's going on. Can you walk through how this account takeover stuff actually works? Because I don't think people have a really good understanding of just how simplistic this actually is.
Yeah, and also actually where these people make money is kind of fascinating as well. So, the usual entry point is, okay, what sorts of organizations should they hit, right? Like, maybe retailers where you can save credit cards for later purchases, et cetera, et cetera. So compile that list. Obviously, they need to get their hands on a big data dump, right? Like usernames and passwords. So once they've got their hands on this, then the cred stuffing starts, right? They've got their proxy nets. They've usually either built themselves or actually contracted out to someone to build what we call a config, which literally is, what it says. It will be something for like Open Bullet, where it is specifically targeted at certain websites, right? Maps out the login flow and then just replays that as a human would. So once that's done, they've hit their 3% whatever across 10, 20, 30, 40 organizations. They go and sell the accounts, right? Maybe it's $1 to $20, depending on what is in the account and how valuable that may be. So this is sort of occurring across like Telegram, Signal, WhatsApp, all the and the Discords, and forums, everywhere you'd expect, right? So they're usually also categorized by what's attached to them. So you're like, let's say, all right, I want an account with a MasterCard attached to it, or I want an account with an Amex attached to it. Like that's typically how they're being sold, because they know that you're probably going to be able to spend more on an Amex than you will like a Visa, and that is reflected in the account's price. So once these are all, up for sale, most of their inventory is sold, what they'll actually start to do as well is sell their configs. So they've made all their money, but you know what? They've got a bit of intellectual property that they know other people don't have. And so they'll put that up for sale for, $150, $200. And, maybe there's an extra few $1,000s in it for them after they've already made their, big hitter selling the actual credentials. And so then the cycle continues. Someone buys it, brings their new credentials this time, which maybe, weren't tested because it's a new breach or whatever. Company runs into the same problem because someone's already built the tool or the config for the tool to hit the website. And now it's sort of, off to the races. And this is where the less sophisticated, more like mass user adoption happens in this space, is once those configs go up for sale, it's really every man, for himself.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty crazy. Especially when you're talking about dumping those things and using them for follow-on attacks. So there's two questions here, one from Duncan and one from Maddie. Do you think there will ever be a crackdown on the legal side to make writing the software illegal, or is that too complex? And then Maddie asks, does the attacker typically take over the account themselves or just sell it right away?
Well, on the legal side, I would love to think that that's what's going to happen. And it should. Like, functionally, this is malware. It's just malware in a slightly different flavor. Instead of infecting, like someone's machine, it's malware, malicious software that is hitting like a website or like an organization. So it should be. How we enforce that is obviously, going to be much more difficult. But I really hope that's actually the path that we're on. Is really tightening the control of this, because we've done it in other areas of software. If you weaponize a 0-day exploit, you get in a lot of trouble. You should probably get in trouble for doing this stuff as well. And then on these people are actually doing, whether they're selling it or using it, they really stick to their lanes, which is quite interesting. So the folks that are cracking the accounts very rarely use it. Like, it's not their model. For whatever reason, and maybe it's because there's more risk associated if you actually go and use it versus the one cracking, and they just may not be willing to wear that. But usually they very much stick within their lanes, right? The people that write the configs, they write the configs. The people that go and crack the accounts, they stick to that. And then there's the people who are buying the accounts and actually using them. So it's almost like they've specialized in a sense, which makes for a very efficient supply chain, if you can kind of call it that.
So it's almost like an enterprise operation, really. I mean, for people have, their careers that are built into those sides of it. And as far as Duncan's question on the legal side, I do a lot of stuff up on Capitol Hill talking with those folks. And unfortunately, the US, we're eons away from this being, number one, a well understood thing, and number two, from actually writing effective legislation that would have anything with teeth to it. So, buckle up, I guess, is all you can get out of that.
Yeah.
So this is cool.
Oh, mate, we lost you again. I can jump in.
I have no idea why that's happening. Maybe somebody's punking me, but this one I thought was really cool because you actually have a toolkit here, open bullet, and it'd be great to kind of hear you talk through what this thing.
Yeah, so look, Open Bullet, free account, or free, they don't say it's for account cracking. They say it's for security professionals to test their own defenses, of course. But this is just cred stuffing software built on top of Headless Chrome, right? The latest iteration, in the account cracking world. What's really impressive about this, though, is its flexibility. So the idea that you can just load up a configuration, which is, I can't remember what scripting language they use, one of the simple ones, to actually mimic really sophisticated human behavior, to execute JavaScript on the back end, trigger Google Analytics, whatever else it may be, to look like customers. So then all you as the user need to do is bring your proxy network, which again, you can go and buy one online or access to one online, totally legitimate residential proxies. And then you go and pay someone for the configuration and, test your credentials. And so you can see in this screen cap, it's very nice, very good, simple UI, straight to the point. Bottom right, you know exactly how successful you've been, exactly sort of the amount of money you've probably made. And then on the bottom left, you can actually see some listings that we took some screen caps of, where, on their little for sale website, they tell you how many credentials they've got, how much they want for each, and then a bit of a description on, what they've cracked. And so you can see here, some of these are, have points attached, MasterCards, Visa, Amex is attached. Again, it's like a a digital version of eBay, but for just stolen accounts and whatever's attached to them. And unfortunately, the amount of skill you need to operate this is not very high, right? That's the scary thing.
Yeah, this looks like regular. Pretty much software that you could get anywhere else. That if you're able to read a README, you could figure out how to use this.
Yeah, exactly, right. And then you go on YouTube. There's endless tutorials on how to do this.
Well, I know what I'll be looking for on YouTube because I wasn't familiar with this. So now I'm probably, if I get in trouble, I'm going to blame this webinar on me getting in trouble. So let's talk about what it takes to stay ahead. We've talked about the adversary side and the bad, but what really does it take to stay ahead? And I think that this is where folks have a misconception that it's just like we were talking about the bad guy side. It's not exceptionally technically difficult to be an adversary. It's also, if you do things correctly, not crazy technical difficult to have a winning strategic position in this place. Like the zero trust stuff makes a heck of a lot of sense to me, especially since you guys engage in that offering. And the point that I'll make here before I let you go on is the philosophy side of it, which is great because y'all aren't talking about tech. You're talking about the philosophy side. Identifies the presence of automation, assumes all requests are guilty, right? That's what we talk about ZT. And then fortifies that with the analytics, the telemetry stuff that we're getting at. So I think that's really valuable proposition for people to understand is in the realm of ZT, I don't trust these connections to be valid until they are proven that they're valid. And then when they are proven that they're valid, I'm going to make sure that it's supposed to occur. Like there's a contextual side of this equation.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like obviously zero trust gets thrown around all the time. And, I think people get caught up in specific implementations of it. But for us and in this bot space in particular, it just means don't trust anything until it has proven that it is legitimate. And, if you think about the case where someone's trying to crack accounts, right? They need one request to be successful. They need one HTTP post to have valid credentials from a new IP to figure out if an account is good. That's it. So there's actually no opportunity to figure out like whether or not they're good or bad after you've seen them once. Like it actually doesn't work, unfortunately. And so that's sort of why we've like heavily focused on this. Okay, let's just assume that everything is bad unless it can prove to us before it interacts with us that it is explicitly good. And the difference this makes is astronomical because it means all of a sudden, even before any request or attack can interact with us, there's cost, right? There is compute cost and there's time cost, which sort of leads me to the next point. We've got to understand our adversaries. Why are they doing this? What drives them? What enables it? And for bots, it's cost, it's cheap. It's usually pretty simple to get access to. So that means you don't need a crazy skill level to do it. So, all right, if we can change those two levers, how do we influence the like economic equation that they're running? Okay, let's make it more expensive and let's make it harder. It's very simple, but if it's going to cost more compute, that means more money. If it's going to take longer to run these attacks, that means less money per hour, right? And then if it's going to take more skill to even get off the ground, smaller number of adversaries to deal with, which means, smaller fallout, smaller fraud losses. And that has been super, super important to us. It's like, really, how can we actually find just what motivates and enables them? Because, at the end of the day, there's a lot of organizations around the world they're going to try and target. And if we can push them off people that we work with purely because it's too much of a pain in the ass and costs too much, that's a win. And then finally, keep it invisible. Right. Unfortunately, we're in a world where the business side of the businesses like really need to care about UX, and it makes sense. Customers need a good experience. And so if we can actually, or if like security tools can actually help enable a good UX, that's such a huge win because customers are happy, more revenue, but they're more secure as well. So that's been a really important thing for us, at least, is how can we do all of this without actually bugging the user? Right? Let the user get the UX that probably millions of dollars was spent on to optimize, everything about their interaction with that brand, so that they never even need to know. They never needed to go on like add up these 20 dice to figure out which one equals 18 or anything like that. Like it's just you go and do your interaction, you forget it ever happened, or you don't even know what happened, but you're better off for it. I think is very, very important because it helps with adoption, right?
Yeah, eliminating captchas is great because like I can't count the number of times I get those things wrong where it's like pick the street lights and you're going, well, is that an actual street light or a piece of a light that I got to click or whatever else? It's just it makes it where it's more kludgy. And I love the point that you're making as far as frustrating the adversary. If it's not worth their time and effort, they'll find another easier target and you win like all day long every day. I mean, if I walk down the street and I'm going to rob people's houses and I see one house that's got three Rottweilers out front and I don't know, an NRA sticker on it, I'm not going to rob that house. If I see the next house and it's got the doors open and the owner is drunk in the front yard, guess who I'm going to rob? I mean, it's just not worth my time and effort to get mauled by Rottweilers.
Exactly. Like it's all people. I think it's important to remember that bots are a means to an end, right? It's all about the people.
And if you interrupt the business model on the bad guys, on the adversary side, you're making an impact that will cause them to change their behavior. And that's a win.
They just can't continue to operate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not worth it. I mean, there is an economic side of this thing, and the juice, as we say in Texas, the juice ain't worth the squeeze. Yeah, so this is how you guys operate, right? Let's talk about how you all do what you do.
Yeah. So, being in the space of stopping bots, we're bloody good at writing bots. And what we put together internally, like initially it was just for us, and then we realized it's actually kind of valuable for other people, is a whole suite of different bots with different levels of sophistication using different like technologies to actually go and like hit someone's website to tell them what works and what doesn't. So we can run that against any website, of course, that you own, and basically give you a report on like, okay, what would out of the box an attacker like have to deal with, and how hard is it going to be? Like, what are their options? The next is then what we call a threat assessment. So we obviously collect enormous amounts of data from all the places on the internet where these folk are hanging out. So okay, can we put together a report for someone that shows, okay, these accounts we've seen for sale from your customers, or we've seen your website mentioned X times in these different forums, right? Just to help get a bit of a pulse check on, are people actually targeting you now, or have they been in the past that you may not have been aware of? And then finally, let's run a proof of concept, right? Proof is in the pudding with this stuff. That's the reality. And we feel very strongly about the fact that you should be able to take our stuff for a test drive, make sure it works, make sure, hey, is there a problem we can solve and add value, either help you save money, reduce fraud losses, whatever it may be. But let's just see what there is to see, right? So that an informed decision can be made about what's actually going on versus what hypothetically could be going on.
So Olga asked a good question here. So what are the main points to pay attention to in order to understand that you're dealing with bots? Like, so what would be a giveaway that this is a bot poking at a network instead of just a regular person?
Yeah, so usually what I and others here would suggest is figuring out, where would someone want to bot you, right? Okay, let's say you run an e-commerce organization, or there's some sort of like business to consumer org. It's probably login endpoints, sign up endpoints, payment endpoints, add to cart endpoints. Honestly, a really, really effective thing is to map traffic to all of those endpoints over maybe a 2-week period, and look for day-night cycles. If you see anything that deviates from a day-night cycle, it's probably a bot. And it's unbelievably simple, but the amount of organizations who actually don't have day-night cycles in their login traffic is astounding. But they've never had it, so they don't know it's not normal. All traffic should do this, because humans go to bed at some point. Even if you're a global business, there are times where there's less humans, there's times where there are more humans. So that's usually the first thing we would suggest. Second is then scale, right? Anything that is scaled, too high is probably not humans. And that's, again, because it's too expensive. Whereas if I can get a piece of software like OpenBullet to test 100,000 credentials for me in an hour, I'm going to do it. There's no way I could get enough humans profitably to do that themselves. So those would be the first, I think, 2 things to think of.
And that's time and scale. So there's 2 really good points to walk away from with that. Let's see what else we have here. So we've answered the questions as we've gone through this. If you have any more, chime in here quickly. We've been going on for about 44 minutes. Usually folks are starting to kind of glaze over by now. But I mean, I think honestly, I've learned a lot on this one. Especially, I may have gotten some interesting insight and maybe a tool I'll play with a little bit, which may get me in trouble. But we'll see what happens. And if you folks that are on this looking to chat more, reach out to the folks at KASADA and ask the questions, because they're the bot experts. And let's see, we have one more. 2 quick questions. Can the slides be downloaded, and is this going to be replayed? So Alexa, I don't know what your plan is there.
I can absolutely share the slides in a follow-up, and I will send the recording as well to everyone who signed up. So yeah, I don't think there was anything super confidential. Sometimes we try to hold it tight, but this is a good one. So thank you everyone for attending, and thank you Chase and Sam, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me. It's a good one.
Yeah. Thank
Cheers.
you all.